many debate the greatest villain of all time. Comic fans might suggest the Joker, Magneto, or Doom. Weebs might say Johann Griffith or Eisen. Movie fans might say Hannibal, Vader, or David Zaslav, but all of these people are wrong. That is because the greatest villain in all of fiction has gotta be Cinderfall, the GOAT from RWBY. Now if you don't know, Cinderfall is from RWBY, which is a show about a team of 4 girls who go to a school so they can train in order to fight monsters basically. Bunch of crazy-ish happens, things get kinda complicated, but basically Cinder is the main antagonist of the show. She isn't the biggest threat in the whole show, but she is the most prominent and impactful villain for 7 of the show's 9 volumes. Some of you may ask, how do you determine the greatest villain of all time? Well, thankfully, the genius that is me has thought up of a scale and an example to show you my scale. So I'm determining the quality of levels of these villains based on their menace factor, how complex they are, and how easy it is to hate them. An example of a great villain, not as great as Cinder, but a great villain, who scores high in all of these categories is Makima from Chainsaw Man. So, Chainsaw Man Part 1, manga spoilers, warning. Menace factor. As for the menace factor, Makima throughout the story is a massive threat. Now the menace factor is less about how scary they actually are, and more so how believable it is that they can achieve their goal and stop our protagonist from achieving their goal. And Makima's goal of ultimate control feels very within her grasp throughout the story. And with how close she gets to completely breaking down Denji and taking control of the Chainsaw Devil. Throughout the story, every time you learn about a new contract or ability she has, it also adds a lot to the menace factor. While you don't have to be scary for the menace factor, being scary is a big part. And everything we see from Makima makes her more scary. It makes us think, how could anyone possibly take it out? What is she gonna do next? What is this new contract? What is this new ability? Is there any limits to what she has in her arsenal? And there is a strong sense of mystery from Makima. You know, there's a level of threat that comes from her cold personality, her mysterious elements of her backstory that we don't know about, the mysterious elements of her identity we don't know about. It makes her more scary because we don't know about her. And then as she takes more and more from Denji, it feels more possible as a reader to see her goals succeeding to the detriment of Denji. She constantly keeps the reader's eyes on the page, keeps the readers on edge, and because of that, she has to get a high score for the menace factor. Now, complexity factor, this is usually the longest one that takes for discussion, because complexity counts for more of how compelling they are as a character and how much they represent the themes and how they are a good representation as antagonist of the negative effects of that theme, or like the negative effects of not, attributing to that theme. It always depends on the story. So Makima is both a very compelling character, just in terms of her pure character, what's written on the page, and in terms of what she represents for the themes. Makima is shown to be caring and tender towards Denji, but so cold that it actually feels completely inhuman. Her caring moments just feel like weird and scary because she is so cold and inhuman, even in her personality when she's being caring and tender. So it creates there's this interesting dynamic being created with this very cold and inhuman and like empty-eyed character having this motherly role. Not exactly motherly, but something like that, with this character Denji, right? And then there's more layers to her character beyond her just being cold and feeling inhuman and distant from what we'd expect from a regular human to be like. And when we learn about her goals, and that her goal is actually one that you might consider honorable. Everyone brings up as a meme that speech she has. Death, hunger, war, all these things would be better without. People meme on that scene a lot, but honestly the panel is great because of the idea that this character, who everything we know about them seems inhumane and almost evil, has this strangely well-meaning goal. I mean, from her own perspective, she wants to create a better world by eliminating concepts that are negative. It contrasts with all the pain we see her cause. and it makes us, the reader, more compelled. It makes us think more. It makes us want to discuss more. Another major thing from just like that makes her compelling from a reader standpoint are the smaller moments, like her at the theater and her crying. You know, seeing a character like this, who you almost never even see emote in a way that feels human, seeing her cry, it feels so strange. Like seeing a vulnerable moment feels so strange for a character that generally feels so untouchable and invulnerable for most of the story until the ending, right? And that makes her very interesting to read because you never really know what she will be next. And now, from a meta narrative standpoint, Makima is excellent. So, in order to talk about how the meta narrative and how she works in it, I have to talk about the themes, right? Some major themes that Part 1 explores is themes of ignorance and relationships, right? Denji, during the earlier sections of the story, is more so ignorant out of no fault of his own, right? Completely broke, no parents, dead parents, no education, no nothing, bum ass, you know. The only thing he really knows when he's younger is that he needs money and that he isn't living a normal life. But he has no actual perspective on what a normal life is. He just knows his is so empty and so void of things, it can't be normal. And because he has nothing, because he grew with very little, he's fine with gaining little. Makima makes him her dog, and he's okay with that because from his own perspective, he isn't aware that he should want more. Then as the story continues, we get more hints and developments that show us Denji being more ignorant out of fear or choice. For example, there is this door that he doesn't want to open. And then there's even characters who further push this belief. You know, you have Guangxi, and she directly states, like in her own way, that ignorance is bliss. You know, from her perspective, knowing less makes it easier to be apathetic, and apathy makes it easier to survive in a world like this. Makima, when it comes to the theme of ignorance, is the representation of the negative effects that stem from this perspective on life. Guangxi literally becomes Makima's puppet, and Denji's own ignorance causes him a lot of pain, and he's only able to avoid becoming a puppet, one, by acknowledging, you know, the fact that he is being manipulated, the fact that he's forced to come to terms with that fact, and because of the fact he can't be apathetic, he can't try to know less or feel less. There will always be things and people he cares about and loves, and he can't try to use ignorance to escape that. He's just unable to do it, you know, in the story. As for relationships, Denji is, at the start of the story, is the most vulnerable because he is pretty much alone, and that's when Makima finds him and shows him affection. Throughout part 1, Denji discovers with his bonds with both Makima and other characters what a healthy relationship is actually supposed to be like. Example is like from Power, raising Himeno is where he learns more about his own perspective and views on intimacy and affection, how he feels like to have a level of physical intimacy and it be satisfying, he has to actually have a affection for that person, which he believes he has for Makima, and he actually does that for Makima. Then, from Power and Aki, he actually learns what it's like to have a family and have genuine, meaningful relationships with other people. And it's only because of his relationships with Power and Aki, as well as the emotional attachments he forms to them, he's actually able to understand what is wrong with his relationship with Makima, even if he does it very late. And he's able to escape her control. Because, okay, if he had been apathetic towards the death of Aki and then the death of Power, there's really nothing stopping him from being just completely controlled by Makima. And there's other things in the story, like you can view from a metatextual standpoint, that are big for Makima. You know, Makima, a lot of people see Makima as a child groomer. I mean, she is literally a groomer. She's grooming him, maybe not in the way of like, oh, how people see like a YouTuber as a child groomer. That's, I guess I'm a YouTuber, so that's a bad example. But like a YouTuber, she's more like, she's literally like grooming him to be his puppet, or her puppet. Right. And you know, you can see as representative of like real life groomer, or at least someone who like psychologically abuses like children, right? If you want to tie her more into the real world, which you definitely can. So Makima thematically represents both the negative repercussions of ignorance, and a manipulative, abusive relationship, which is why she gets a high complex factor rating. She's very interesting to read whenever she is on the page, or I guess on screen if you're watching anime. And Denji's story, the themes of Chainsaw Man Part 1, they don't work without the character Makima. Now, this isn't the deepest take on Chainsaw Man. There's a lot more to discuss with its themes. There's a lot more to discuss with even just the theme of ignorance and relationship that I couldn't mention here, because I'm trying to keep it completely focused on just Makima and trying to explain, hopefully I explain like why she is a compelling and complex villain in a short enough way for this example. Hatred factor. Oh my god. Do I even have to talk about the hatred factor from Makima? I mean, listen, dude, I'm only gonna bring up one chapter actually, or two, I guess, because I feel like this isn't scripted, because I feel like that's all you need. Just if you've read Chainsaw Man Part 1, just everything from chapter 81 and chapter 82, those alone will make you, hate Makima from an in-character standpoint. The heinous things she does and says is the most hateable thing of all time. And it's perfect. It's perfect. And for certain antagonists, the hateability factor is going to be judged more on how much you can like them, because there's certain antagonists you're supposed to like. But there's nothing in the story that will make you like Makima as a person. As a character, obviously you can like her writing, but you're never gonna like Makima. You're always gonna just like, unless you're like a freak, you're just gonna see her, like the horrible actions, her manipulations, and just feel so much hate for her and so much sympathy for Denji just by consequence. Alright, so now that I'm done talking about Makima, the example, I can get to Cinder. Wait, how long have I been recording for? That's like the longest video I've ever recorded. Huh, fuck, Cinder. I never, fuck. Huh. Well, I mean, like I said at the start of the video, Makima from Chainsaw Man, the greatest villain ever.